Holy Spirit this morning. That as the scriptures have been read and your word be proclaimed, that we may hear with joy what you say to us today. Amen. It was a different time. It was a different time when these events occurred. Different than what we're used to. It was a patriarchal society, which meant, ladies, sorry, the men were in control. They ruled. Whatever they said went. And Hagar was a slave woman. She was an Egyptian. She was a woman in this culture where men ruled, and a woman used by another woman and her man to fulfill their dream of descendants. This is the culture that Hagar was living in. Abraham and Sarah were part of that. And of course, Abraham and Sarah were within their rights to use her this way. I don't know about you, but think about that. They were within their rights. It was the way society, it was culturally acceptable for the wife of a man to give one of her handmaids to him to have a child. So you know what happened. God said to Sarah and Abraham that they were going to have a child. It was going to be a year. But they got antsy, didn't think it was going to happen. Sarah says, here's Hagar, Abraham, let's have her have your son, and he'll be the heir. Things change. Sarah gets pregnant. Sarah has Isaac. Isaac is weaned. Isaac is getting old enough now. Ishmael at this time is probably around 13 years old. So Ishmael's older, Isaac's a baby, and Sarah doesn't think it's right. Sarah is jealous because what happens is that the boy's growing up, and she's jealous of Hagar because Abraham's spending a lot of time with his son, as he should. So Sarah wants the mother and child banished. She wants them out of her home, didn't care what happened to them. And she tells Abraham as much. Well, the story tells us that Abraham's distressed, and rightly he should be. Doesn't maybe understand why he's so distressed, but he doesn't want to do it. And God said to Abraham, it's okay. Do what Sarah has, because I have a promise for your son Ishmael. God said, go ahead. Let him leave. Abraham gives them a loaf of bread and a skin of water and sends them into the desert. Now, I don't know about you, but a loaf of bread and a skin of water into the desert doesn't seem like much, but Abraham was doing what he thought he could. But they were banished, they were sent away into the desert. But when the food and water ran out, Hagar prepares for the death of her child. She sets him under a bush, moves away from him because she can't bear to see him die. And then something extraordinary happens. God shows up. And I don't know about you, but when God shows up, extraordinary things are going to happen. And God appears to Hagar herself. God, we're told, hears the cry of the child. And the God who is attuned to the sound of human suffering responds with a promise. He responds with a promise of nation making. Now, Abraham and Sarah have the promise that their descendants will multiply from Isaac on down, and theirs will be the nation Israel. Okay? So here we have a whole different set of things. We have Hagar, we have Ishmael, and God says, I'm going to make a nation of Ishmael. So really, he's giving him a promise that's almost like Abraham's and Sarah, but not quite. He's not going to be Israel, Isaac's line. will be Israel. Well, God responds with that promise, and he responds with a well from which they can drink. And then we're told that the boy grew up strong, became an archer, and married an Egyptian woman. So they both survived. Now, the presence of God is seen in all the relationships between all these characters. God is in this. You see, there's a promise to the aging couple, a promise to be kept despite their fear and cunning, okay? They were afraid it wasn't going to happen. Sarah was 90 years old. She laughed, remember? But it happened. Isaac was born. So now they have a problem. But God's in this relationship. And because God is God, and he keeps his promises, he's there. He gives them what he promised. And then we see that he has care for a slave woman and her child, care for this family on the margins, care that doesn't keep them in their circumstances. But he responds to their changing circumstances. They're cast out from Abraham and Sarah's home, and God doesn't stop that action, but he meets them in the wilderness and provides a future and care in the present. Okay, God's got two promises, one to Abraham and Sarah, one to Hagar and Ishmael. We wonder why. There's suffering in the world, and why God allows people to wrongly threaten others, whether it's culturally acceptable at the time or not. You see, what Abraham and Sarah did was culturally acceptable. In fact, they had every right to do that. But is it right? Why do we want to hurt one another? What is it with us that why do we want to hurt one another? Oh, there was a time in my life that I would rather fight than switch. Why is that? Why? What is it within us? And sometimes we wonder why God lets these kind of things happen. It's a question that's been ever present, ever since the fall. Why did God let the serpent in the garden to begin with? Why did God let Eve and Adam eat that fruit? Why did God let Cain and Abel fight one another and Abel get killed? Why? I don't know that I can answer that question, but I can tell you this. God is ever present. God is ever present. He's here today. He's here today. And he goes with us when we leave this place. And he's still here. He's omnipresent. He's here. He's with us today. But he's also present with those who suffer, with those on the margins, and creatively works to bring goodness and care even when we humans have brought distress and alienation. He was there Thursday for a giveaway or a distribution. He showed up, didn't he? He's working all the way around us. We see snippets here and there. We see people helping people. We see people doing kindness. We see people loving one another. We see people coming together to try to find some kind of solution. God's at work. He's ever present. But we still have this thing that we want to cause distress and alienation. Hagar will name God the one who sees, because he saw her and her son in the desert about to die. He's the one who sees. This God who sees is still watching. Now get this. God who sees is still watching the sibling rivalry between the children of Ishmael and the children of Isaac. We know too well that sibling rivalry, right? It's been playing out for centuries. Still no conclusion or solution. You know what sibling rivalries want? You know, the questions we might ask are God's grace and care large enough to support both promises? Ishmael and Isaac? Why have the promises of land and descendants caused such turmoil? Well, if you've had more than one child in your family, you know why. You give one something and you give the other, you don't give the other one much of something, there's going to be some rivalry. Well, you know, the Smothers brothers, you know, the one that says, well, Mom always liked you better than me. You hear that? Well, maybe these two groups are saying, well, God liked you better than he did me. There is that sibling rivalry. Does God have a creative solution in store for these people? I think God does have a creative solution in store. We just don't know what it is yet. He does. He does. You know, and we're sitting back and going, okay, God, we know you got this, but pull back the curtain just a little bit. Let us get a glimpse. But then maybe we won't want to see the glimpse we see. You believe Jesus is coming back?
Yep.
Oh, you're okay. Yeah. Is Jesus coming back?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a little better response. When?
Any minute now.
There, that's it. Who knows? That's right. Who knows? We don't. Is that God's creative solution to send him back? It might just be. It might just be that what God has the solution in mind, and we may be in that time. I don't know. There are certainly things that might point that way, but I've said it once, and I'll say it again. We've been in the last days since Jesus ascended into heaven. Yes, we're in the last days. When will he come? Is this enough to make him come? Remember, we've been through wars and rumors of wars and more things in these past 2,000 years than just what's happening now. My question is, it looked like World War II was going to end it all. Did he come? No. We got things worked out. I'm just saying that could be God's creative solution that we're looking at, but I don't know. Maybe he's got another. Maybe he's got a solution where everything does work out for a while. That's what my prayer is. My prayer is that God's in the midst of this and he's in control of the situation and he's giving wisdom and this creativity to everyone that's in the midst of it and is trying to find solutions. My thing of it is, they have the wisdom, but are they listening to it? That's about as political as I'm going to be. But are they listening? Do we listen to God? When's the last time you listened to God? Maybe you're part of the solution. You know what? Jesus is the answer. Said last week, and I'm going to keep saying that because he is. He's the answer. The thing about it is we have the answer, right? He's right here. We have the answer. There are others out there that don't. They don't know that Jesus is the answer. So how do they come to know? We got to tell them. We got to tell them. It's us. We may be God's creative solution for this time. We're told that in Esther that for such a time as this, she became queen. So for such a time as this, we believers need to tell others. You see, the creative God of Genesis, this God who surprises Abraham and Sarah with the promise of a multitude of descendants. This God who makes the same promise to a slave girl from Egypt. This same God is a provider and a way maker for all. For all. For us, for those who cast out, for those who've been put down in our society, for the victims of poverty, for the victim of any kind of racism or ism that you can think of, and particularly now racism. God has a way. God has a solution. It's His Son Jesus. And it's us showing love to one another, not distress and alienation. You see, God will show up as creative love and power, even and especially to those least among us. Jesus said, if we do it to the least of these, our brothers and sisters, we've done it to Him. Both positive and negative, right? God does have a solution. And it may be us. Let's pray. Heavenly Father.